I took a wildlife tracking class. If you ever see these types of tracks in the woods, run. I wish I'd taken a photo. Wish that I'd drawn what it looked like at the time. But I was too ashamed to tell this story until now, because what happened is partly my fault. I wasn't completely proficient back then. I'm a sign language interpreter, and at the time I just graduated. Maybe if I'd been better at my job. I saw the gig for the animal tracking and wilderness exploration class and thought it sounded like a fun experience for a newbie like me. And I really needed the work. So, I accepted the job. Arrived half an hour early. I was pretty nervous back then. Anytime meeting a new deaf person was nerve-wracking because what if I couldn't understand them? What if we didn't jibe? What if they were one of those really fast signers who just have no patience for beginners? And so I went early hoping I could glean some context for the job and learn her preferred signs for the vocabulary related to the trails. But it was rocky from the get-go. The moment I stepped out of my beat-up Honda and started to introduce myself, she signed, "You're late. You were supposed to be here half an hour ago." "Oh, I'm sorry. Maybe the agency gave me the wrong time," I stammered, my hands fumbling. Of all the days for me to get it wrong, I was already so nervous. I said, "You must be lying." Her name was Leilani, but in the moment I forgot how to spell it. She quickly corrected me, her fingers so fast I didn't catch more than the L. But then she gave me her name sign, her hand in L shape, and brushed the tip of her thumb against her cheek in a repeat motion. It was an easy one, thank goodness. Then rolling her eyes, she opened her mouth and spoke aloud in deaf accented English. "Okay, well, the interpreter is here now, so I guess we can get started, everyone." Trying not to hide how relieved I was that she voiced for herself, I fell into step with her students. There were only 3, a father and son and a middle-aged woman. "Is this all?" I asked, looking around in surprise. The guide shrugged. "It's so cold this morning, a lot of people probably decided to stay in their warm beds." Then she spoke aloud to the trio. "The fresh snow is great for seeing tracks." The man and his son were named Damien and Dee. Dee was 9, very excited, and claimed to see a deer in the trees every few minutes. Damien was a laid-back parent who made constant dad jokes. It was apparent he mostly brought his son here because of the boy's love of animals. Our last member, Chantal, was a gray-haired woman covered in healing gemstone bracelets who told us she enjoyed foraging for herbs and mushrooms. The freshly fallen snow had formed a crunchy, icy crust on the surface of the world, and it crunched pleasantly under our boots as we set off on the wintry trail. The sun's rays glistened off the surface of the snow like diamonds. Since the guide didn't need me to voice, my job was relaxingly easy. I signed whenever one of the 3 hearing people interjected a comment or question, or in Damien's case, a silly dad joke. 20 minutes passed on the trail, and then we took a pause so that Dee could wander off into the bushes because predictably, the little boy needed to pee. While we waited, our guide turned keen eyes to me. She was a spry woman with crow's feet and just a hint of gray in her hair. "Nice to be an interpreter, huh?" she sighed. "I bet you get to go do all sorts of interesting gigs." "This is definitely the coolest," I replied, and I meant it. I told her I mostly interpreted college classes teamed with a more seasoned interpreter because I was still new. Her smirk said, "Yeah, I can tell." But she was gentler now that we were on the trail and remarked, "Worth coming out on a frigid Saturday morning?" "Saturday? You mean Friday?" "No, Saturday. Definitely Friday." I checked my calendar and showed her. "Oh dang. I get so mixed up sometimes." She laughed, and the tension broke between us. Then she looked worried. "Maybe you were early instead of late. I hope I don't have other students waiting for me back at the parking lot." "Oh God, what if I got the time wrong?" For a second her expression clouded over. But then, like the sun piercing the clouds, she grinned as she noticed something in the bushes. "Hey, raspberries." I saw only thorny sticks bowed over into the snow. Our guide chuckled and explained, voicing aloud for the others, that raspberries are pretty easy to identify. These canes grow tall and then loop down to the ground like this. The laterals, that's these side branches, produce the berries. You can recognize them by the leaves, always in a trio. She fingered a few remaining dead leaves. Raspberries, huh, said Damien, as Dee returned from his pee break to examine the thorny shrubbery. Hey Dee, know how you can tell a raspberry bush? The leaves, he said, echoing our guide. That's her way. But I'll let you in on a secret, easier way. Damien bent down and whispered loudly in his son's ear, just look for the red berries. Then you know, raspberry bush. We all just chuckled at Damien's usual dadness, while Dee protested loudly that there are no berries in winter. But everyone forgot the berries when our guide pointed out animal prints up ahead in the snow. Our first tracks. The two oval indents were deer hoofprints marching through the snow across our path and into the trees. Dee immediately wanted to follow, but our guide convinced him we should stick to the trail. Soon we identified rabbit and squirrel tracks, as well as some bird prints. But then, just as we reached a dip in the trail leading to a narrow stream, our guide frowned at a set of very large prints. They came from the trail beyond and vanished into the stream in front of us, and looked almost like human feet, almost, but with longer toes. It was difficult for her to get a clear sense of the prints, she told us, because whatever creature made them was shuffling along through the snow, making the prints blurred and elongated. Oh, a mystery. Damien nudged Dee. Let's follow them, squealed Dee. Is it safe? It's not a bear, is it? Wondered Chantal. No, not a bear. Definitely not, the guide assured us. She eyed the tracks again, frowning. They came down the very trail we'd be taking if we crossed the stream. But because the tracks went into the stream, presumably coming out somewhere else, if we followed them, we'd be heading in the direction the animal came from, not the direction it was going to. Meaning we were unlikely to run into it. Anyway, there weren't any large dangerous animals in these woods, according to our guide. After pondering for a moment, she declared we could finish the trail loop. Once we crested the hill, it would curve around across a meadow and take us back to the parking lot. What if there are human tracks? Chantal said. Last year, a hiker went missing here. What if it's them? Our guide looked skeptical. Are you sure you aren't thinking of a different park? I've worked here for years and never heard of anyone going missing except one hiker who got found a day or two later. It was definitely here, insists Chantal. I remembered because I avoided coming here for months because of it, even though I lived pretty close by. The story just scared me. A hiker wouldn't be wandering out here a full year, especially barefoot. There have been dozens of people on this trail since. The guide shrugged. Dee was already up ahead of us, forging across the stream and then dashing through the snow. The tracks lead up here, he shouted. Hey, Dee! Don't run so far. Damien hollered. We all hurried to catch up. Dee had stopped at the crest of the hill and stood there, small in the bright sun, staring at something. As we all caught up, panting and out of breath, we looked to see what had captivated his attention. Here at the hill's crest, the trail forked. In one direction, it descended across a wide field, slowly looping back towards the woods and stream and presumably the parking lot where we'd started. In the other direction, the tracks followed the trail through dense trees and into a cleft in a rocky cliff face, vanishing into darkness. Which way do we go? Asked Chantal, turning to look along the sunnier trail. But Dee kept pointing to the tracks and the cave and saying, please, let's follow the tracks. Please? Can't we see what's there? I don't know, buddy, said Damien. You sure you want to go into a spooky dark cave? Yes. The guide, meanwhile, pursed her lips. She caught my eye and sighed. They could be human tracks. If they are, they're barefoot, and the way they're dragging their feet in the snow, they need help. If there's any camping material in that cave, maybe it's someone who got stuck out here. But her eyes narrowed on the cliff wall. She motioned me to join her, and we followed the footprints through the trees. Dee immediately tailed us, which meant so did everyone else. As we approached the split in the rock face, the guide paused and signed to me, "I'm going to see what's in there." The thing is, I've hiked these trails for years. I don't remember there being a fork like this. It's strange. This shouldn't be here. I need to check and see what's going on. Stay with the group. I'll let you know if it's safe and just ends up being an empty cave or something. Are you sure you don't want me to? Stay, she sighed. Then she turned and called aloud to the other three, "Stay here. I'm going to go check and make sure it's safe." The wait for our guide's return seemed forever. We had left the sun behind and stood in the shade of that rocky cliff. The temperature felt as if it had plummeted 20 degrees. And not just a chill on my skin, but the cold seemed to have injected into my very veins. An ice pick of terror that increased with every passing moment. My heart rate escalated. Suddenly I thought maybe I understood what people meant when they talked about negative energy. The path was wrong. It shouldn't be here. We shouldn't be here. And the tracks, something human or not quite human? What did that even mean? The wait for our guide seemed an eternity. Finally, the crunch of snow and relief whooshed out of me in a sigh as the guide appeared at the mouth of the opening and called, "It's safe. Everyone come on." Dee bolted ahead. Damien and Chantal followed. The guide called again, the same phrase, "It's safe. Everyone come on." But her hands were moving. The others probably thought she was signing, "Let's go." Looking back, I wish I had more experience. Wish I'd trusted my eyes more. Because maybe then I would have shouted a warning. If I'd been a more experienced interpreter, could I have stopped what happened? I don't know. I was still trying to make it all out, confused because my ears and eyes contradicted each other. Her voice said, "It's safe. Everyone come on." But the pointer finger of her right hand slid between the splayed fingers of her left and jerked outward. A motion that looked as if her pointer finger were escaping. "Run. Don't follow her," I shouted. Too late. Dee and Chantal had already gone in. Damien was slower and cast one look back at me before plunging into the dark after his son. Now there was only me. The guide looked at me. Her face contorted, lips pulling back over teeth and gums. For a moment, she looked like a long-ago rotted corpse, the flesh withered away. Then I blinked and she was smiling, an ordinary smile. Her hands lifted, spasmed, and shook. And then instead of telling me to escape, her arms gestured stiffly like those of a marionette. "Come." Now, her voice and gestures matched as she said, "Come on." I fled. Reaching the parking lot, I was stunned to find a group mingling in the snow. A young deaf woman with long black hair stood at the front of the group signing angrily at her phone screen. "Hey." I waved at her. "Hey. Are you from the wilderness group? I need help." "Oh, finally." She whirled to face me, demanding to know why I was late. Her hands flew fast. So fast. Flustered, I interrupted, trying to explain to her about our guide, Laila. "What the hell are you talking about?" She interrupted my spelling the name to sign to me, "I am Leilani." What? So who had I been interpreting for? It turns out the name sign I showed her, the hand brushed against my cheek, belonged to a woman named Lorelei, who had previously been the trail guide and had mentored and later hired on Leilani. "Lorelei's been missing since last year," she explained. "She disappeared when she was taking a group out on the trail. She went to check some strange tracks and never came back." Last year, had the trek been on a Saturday? 10 a.m. instead of 11 a.m.? My blood froze. Suddenly, all the misunderstood details made sense. Leilani, the real Leilani, insisted I lead her to the fork in the trail where her mentor had vanished into the cave. We followed the crisp, clear prints in the snow all the way to the stream and up the crest of the hill. There was no longer any fork. In fact, no one's footsteps but mine emerged from the other side of the stream. It appeared as if I had gone up the slope, turned myself around in a circle a few times up there, and then run along the path looping back to the parking lot. But as we got back to the parking lot, I noticed something. In the crisp snow, the impressions our boots had made were clear. There were mine, Damien's, Dee's, and Chantal's, big boots, little boots, all with differing treads. But as for Lorelai's, I couldn't find any boots matching the ones I'd seen her wearing. The final set of prints among our group from the parking lot, shuffling around in the place where Lorelai had stood, were barefoot with elongated toes.